For the next 45 minutes, I'll be joined with Dave Calley and Shane Calley as we discuss preparation for the building industry with Level 3 commencing next week. For those of you who don't know about EBOSS, we set up in 2006. We work with all the leading product suppliers to help format and present product technical information to the builder and architectural community of New Zealand. It's great for us to be able to keep you updated with our newsletters, but also with webinars like today. Okay, so I would like to now bring in Dave and Johnny, who will be joining us today. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
So Dave, you're Chief Executive of Master Builders and previous Chair of the Construction Industry Council until last year. And you're also a member of the Construction Accord Steering Group. So you'll give us a great high level of where the industries come from and the objectives of the initiatives that we've got in place that we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny, great to have you here as well. Johnny owns and operates Calley Homes in the Bay of Plenty. You've got 25 builders on your staff. Johnny's also a national board member and director of Master Builders and current chair of the residential working group, which has played a major part in putting together the health and safety protocols for the New Zealand residential construction in response to Covid-19. So, gentlemen, between the two of you, Johnny, you've obviously got a lot of experience in thinking about how you implement all of these policies and regulations and have been working with Dave around how we put them all together. So we've got a good team to progress. Now, firstly, gentlemen, we've all had an interesting few weeks. So can you just give me some quick insights into what your 4 weeks have looked like? Can I get a favourite meal from you both you've experienced?
Oh, I like all sorts of food, but right now I'm enjoying a home roasted chicken with roasted vegetables and a ton of gravy.
Nice and solid there, Dave. Like it. Excellent. And Johnny?
Yeah, much the same. Actually, having 3 meals at home each day is quite unique for me. Usually I'm breakfast and dinner, but dinner is one step ahead of Dave. I'd go the roast lamb. That's been the weekly favourite so far, and I think it's actually on the menu tonight, so it's going to be good.
Right, okay. Well, we won't keep you too long. Gentlemen, what about your health and fitness? What have you been doing to keep the body moving?
Yeah, for me, I try and get out at least, once a day, try and get out and go for a good long walk. Been pretty busy and lots of calls, so it's a good chance just to clear the head. I think, it does the world. We've been lucky with the weather, I think, Matt, too.
Yep.
Might not have been as much fun if it was the middle of June.
Yes. No, it's been easier to get outside when the sun's shining. And Johnny, what about you?
I'm into my triathlon, so in the new virtual world, I've been spending lots of time in front of a TV screen with Zwift, which allows you to ride internationally from your own home.
Yep.
So daily Zwift meetings with friends from overseas has kept me physically fit, and definitely mental fitness has been a key player, I think, moving into this COVID situation. So just talking to heaps of people, industry peers, and just really discussing what the future might look like.
Yep, great. And Dave, any insights into mental health? It's a good point, Johnny, because it's we've had a big focus on that in the construction industry of late. So any insights or tips there, Dave?
Oh, on a personal level, apart from the getting outside, it's very much keeping in touch with family and friends. Making sure they're all right as well, and checking in and sharing a laugh. And then same as Johnny, actually, taking the opportunity to get hold of people, and people who you can just share some of your frustrations with sometimes as well. So there's a pretty good support group, and that's been really helpful.
Yeah, great. And gentlemen, have you learned any new skills over the last few weeks?
I might have learned a little bit more about the use of technology. So a little bit better, still a long way to go. But probably also from a business point of view, learn that you can use technology to substitute for some of the face-to-face stuff and the travel that I tend to do quite a bit of. So actually coming out of it, I think we'll certainly, as a business from Master Builders, be working in a different way and using technology to keep in contact with our members and lifting our game there has been quite a big learning for us. The challenge will be to keep it going.
Yes, well, we've got 2,000 people on this webinar now, so that's an amazingly efficient way to reach people with the right information, which hopefully we'll be delivering over the next half an hour or so. So, Johnny, what about you? What have learned any new skills?
Look, no, I wouldn't say any new skills, but I have learned that my 9-year-old son is definitely more adequate than I am at IT, and so I've learned a lot of him. But much the same as Dave, I think this is the new way of communicating. It's not going to disappear over the next 2 weeks for sure. And I've just probably enjoyed adapting to the situation. And look, some of the things that we will learn through this process, no doubt will form part of our day-to-day running of businesses moving forward. So I think we should embrace some of the new ways that we're communicating and using technology.
Yeah. Well, speaking of technology, for those of you who aren't familiar with webinar communication, you'll see in your menu bar that we have a couple of options. We have a live chat. I've got John and Sandy in the background who are monitoring that for us. So if you've got any questions or comments, please put it through there. We also have a Q&A as well. We do have a function to raise hands, but I'll probably ignore that for a while just to make sure we can get through the content. So chat or Q&A should be the best way forward. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, gentlemen. Dave, I'm going to throw to you first, just really starting to give us an overview of level 3. So from a high level, please give us a bit of an overview.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So level 3, in terms of how we operate in construction compared to level 4, as the Prime Minister has said, is a high trust model. And thinking about that, the industry came together under the construction accord. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a construction sector and government approach where we've been working together to try and look at how we improve the performance of the construction sector. And that was set up about 15 months ago. So it's really come into its own, this situation. So under the umbrella of the Accord, Construction Health and Safety New Zealand have taken the lead on developing the high-level standards and principles. And then underneath that, there's 2 groups that have developed the protocols, which is the tell me what I need to do to get back on site safely. And Johnny's chaired that. I think that just going on from the high trust model, while we've all been frustrated about not being able to get back to work, we at least know that next day we can get back to work, and then there's a 2-week period when it will be reviewed, and if we're lucky we might go to level 2. By comparison, the likes of retail and restaurants and so on are nowhere near where we're at. So we're in a privileged position. One of the reasons that we're in that position is because of the work that's been done around these protocols and standards. What it did was to give government officials and ministers a greater degree of confidence that the construction industry has done the work, that it's taken leadership, and that we can be trusted. The really key message, I think, for me here, though, is that it will need all of the industry to adhere to these. The work that's been done is to try and give some practical guidance about what you need to do. But it's not optional. One of the things we'll probably talk about later on is around the policing of this. I think a lot of this needs to be self-policing. The worst thing that would result, I think, is that we have some parts of the industry ignore them, act like cowboys, and then we lose the trust of government and we go back to level 4. That would be a disaster, and it would decimate the industry, in my view. It's tough enough as it is. So the key things really are around ensuring on-site register of everyone going onto site. Johnny will get into more of the detail, but there needs to be a register so that if anything happens, there can be contact tracing. On-site hygiene, so wash stations as a minimum, disposing of PPE gear where it's used, and keeping the social distancing. So those are the key things, and there's some detail under that and guidance. I think the good thing is that these haven't been set down by a central government agency. They've been developed by the industry, by people in business in the industry and who are thinking about what they want to do and what they need to do. So I think that's probably the key thing. So I think it's been a really good piece of work. We're well ahead of a number of other industries and have already developed these, and we were already we're already starting to think about level 2 as well.
Great. Okay, we can touch on that a little bit later. So for all intents and purposes, the entire construction industry is opening up next week.
Yep,
and
that's right.
We've got the regulations that are in place. You've set expectations around there's going to be some self-policing, and this is our opportunity to lose. So we need to make sure that we are prepared and operate successfully under the expectations that government have been given. And I touched on the health and safety protocols. Johnny, I'll bring you in here. Can you just give me a quick overview of what you see the role of those protocols, and just a bit of an overview there at a high level, because we'll jump into that in a bit more detail as we go through the presentation.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to understand that the guidelines and protocols set out are exactly that. They're a guideline. Every entity and company and business within our industry needs to implement their own policy. So I think within sticking to those guidelines where possible. So, I mean, for instance, I've spent, and my team has spent the last week looking at how we can operate and deliver those. And so, I mean, it's as we can get into some detail around questions, but effectively the on and off site movement on and off site is critically important, and the tracing of that. So when you come to a site, we need to first sanitize our hands, because that's been suggested as one of the key areas to mitigate the spread. So a wash station needs to be at the entry to the site. Then we also need to go through a process of identifying who that is, their contact details, where they've been and where they're going. So there's a tracing element beyond that. Now, if the person arrives to site and they're fit and well, and they sanitize their hands and do that process, they move on to site as a safe bubble, and that site then can operate with the confidence that individual has taken those steps to manage their risk to COVID. Now, when you're on site, we need to be aware of our physical distancing. That's hugely important as well as a guideline. Now, the government's recommendation is 2 metres, and that's been suggested in the protocols, but quite clearly that's not able to be achieved in all aspects of construction. And so people will have to work within a closer distance. And so that can happen, but you need to take each situation as it comes and make sure that the people that are working in those close contacts are managing that, and that they're just not relaxing their site policy and working closely together just because of the sake of it. So I think it's been a bit smarter around how we function on site. And then there's just things like smoko breaks, lunch breaks, those types of things. Putting in processes on site so people are keeping their distance, so that site offices aren't open and people are looking over a set of plans over each other's shoulder. Site offices should be shut and only accessed case by case, and just eliminating all areas of contact. There's going to be sanitation around portaloos that needs to be considered. So individual sites need to, I guess, put in place processes around that, and manage it, making sure that happens, and around tools. People are going to be potentially using the same tools. So making sure that there are opportunities to clean those tools in between individual use. So
Right. Yeah. Hey, Johnny, we'll get into some more detail a little bit later on. I just want to, we can actually just move on from here. I'm just having a look at some of the questions coming through. Will this webinar be available? Yes, it will be. We're recording it, so it'll be available on the EBOSS website. So we'll get you a link for that if you want to share it with your staff or with colleagues. Get some questions coming through about, do you require sanitizer on site if you have running water and liquid soap? So maybe we can come into some of those practical tips towards the end when we talk about different scenarios. What I'd like to get into now is thinking about preparation. So Dave, on Monday, the Prime Minister referenced a scenario where suppliers might access their warehouse this week in preparation for opening next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Can builders go to site this week?
So we were having a chat about this earlier, and there's been no specific comment about that, but there was also no exception given for construction industry. Our view is that people shouldn't be going to site this week. They should wait till Tuesday. You can imagine if everyone started to do that, then we'd have huge numbers of people travelling all around the country. So our view is that this week you should focus on planning. The fact that there's a couple of days earlier in terms of working days, I think there will still be quite a number of people who are not ready to go back to site anyway. So focus a lot on your planning, talking to your teams, talking to your suppliers, getting signs made up. That's the stuff that should happen this week.
Great. So Johnny, can you give us a practical example? What are you focusing on this week? I know there's a lot to do, but if you could just keep it at the high level, what are the things in front of your mind that everyone should be thinking about?
Well, exactly what David said. I mean, the reality is under level 4, you can't get signs made at the moment. So what you can do is prepare for that, send your sign writer the JPEG files, get your policies in place for your individual sites, your sign-in registers. Just speak to your teams, speak to your supply chain, speak to everyone, and get prepared so that when Tuesday comes around, you're starting to implement those procedures and policies that you've got in place.
Okay, great. Okay, so in terms of, if we can now move on to opening up next Tuesday, Johnny, can you talk us through what you see for Tuesday, Wednesday on from there? What does it look like for you?
Oh, chaos, to be honest. We're going to be, I mean, that's why I'm saying preparation's key. To put a wash station at the start of your site, you're going to need a plumber. So I'd be talking to him pretty quickly, unless you've got handyman on your sites. Site signage is really important. Entering and exiting the site are just about the two most important things. So we'll be getting site signage put up, our wash stations, and physical distancing. I think it's been encouraged that you set out an area at the start of your site so people can actually see what 2 meters looks like, whether that's just markings on a ground or on the fence. Move your toilets to practical locations, and just get all your hand sanitation facilities up and running. So I don't see much physical work going on my sites over Tuesday, Wednesday. I see a lot of practical work around getting the site functional, and then I see probably from about Thursday real building activity happening.
Yep. So can we just clear off the hand sanitizer versus running water and soap? So there's lots of commercial entities out there pushing hand sanitizer. Johnny, soap and running water is fine?
Soap and running water, and it can be the trusty old bar of soap from the supermarket, is what's recommended by the government. The government is suggesting soap and water to be the most effective way to wash your hands. Hand sanitizer is a non-soap solution if you don't have running water. So I think the clear message is where possible, use soap and running water. And again, don't be swayed by some decent marketing that's going on out in the marketplace at the moment for alternate options.
Yep. So Johnny, just in terms of entering the site, we've obviously, can you just talk a little bit about induction for both your own staff and for subcontractors and visitors?
Yeah. So part of this week's preparation is for us to actually send out to our sub-trade network, our staff and clients, anyone that's coming to our site or is preparing to come to our site. They'll be sent a list of the protocols first and foremost, and then our individual policy. When they come to our site, they'll be inducted by the site manager, and they will be walked through those strict protocols on site. But before they get there, we're going to try to encourage that we'll know that they're coming, so that we're not just getting a walk-up crowd and then having interference or ad hoc inductions happening. We're going to try and streamline that, so we're doing it case by case.
Okay. Yep. And so what are you setting up for people coming to site? We've had some questions around, why do I have to put a register for contact tracing when I have to do it at the supermarket or the gas station? So there is a, Dave, I don't know if you want to comment on why we're doing it, but Johnny, I'm interested to know how you're doing it.
How we're doing it? We're actually going to be doing it in the very manual way of a sheet of paper with a format so that people can write their details down. There are some apps that are starting to come to the surface at the moment, which we're currently looking into. So we may be implementing an IT system at our site shortly, but for the startup point, we're just going to be using we've self-generated a piece of paper, or like a format where people leave their details, and importantly, where they're going next is one of the questions we're asking on it. So that if we are part of a contact tracing process, we can hand over the details of everyone that's been on our site and where they went next, so that next line of tracing can happen if need be.
Okay. Dave, any comments on that?
Yeah, well, just in terms of why, I think if you followed what the decision-making process was for the government from level 4 to level 3, they had 4. One of the most important one was the contact tracing, and that's where they are really lifting the game from a medical, the Department of Health point of view, to try and ensure that if there's any outbreak, any case at all, they can do that contact tracing as fast as possible, and that's been made a requirement. And if you think about construction sites, we do have certain people going onto construction sites that will go to multiple sites, which is different from going to the supermarket. So specialist trade, plumbers and electricians may be working across multiple sites. The building inspectors might be working at multiple sites. People making deliveries will be. So that's the purpose. And so keeping that record will be important, so that if there's any outbreak, it can be clamped down on really quickly.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So we really need to think about who is actually what is the term around how do we determine who is an essential visitor? So who should actually be accessing the site? And Johnny, we're talking really here from a residential point of view. Obviously, we've got to think about vertical construction, commercial construction. There's 2 sets of protocols that everyone should be aware of. But continuing with our residential focus, I'm imagining your sites are going to have restricted access, and that'll be clearly indicated. And you, how are you going to deal with inspectors? How are you going to deal with subcontractors and other potential visitors? Because I'm actually assuming that no merchant reps will be coming around to your sites. That's indication we've got from merchants is that that'll be online ordering and contactless delivery. So talk to me about inspectors and other visitors that you will be providing access to the site to.
Yeah, okay, good question. Look, and I think we also need to talk about the client here. I mean, every residential site has a client quite keen on the progress and makeup of their house. So firstly, and in most cases, we'll be trying to communicate with them in this type of format, online and streaming. They will be invited to site if necessary, and definitely in a very controlled manner, and more likely to be without any other construction activity happening, so very isolated. Councils are aware of the protocols that the industry has set out, and will be expecting those to be followed strictly. So the councils all have their own individual policies, how they operate, but effectively when they turn up to a construction site, they will be expecting to follow the same protocols as everyone else. And they should be, like most others, a known visitor to that site. So they'll come at their allocated inspection time, and they'll expect to be inducted and treated like any other visitor to that site. If they turn up to sites and there's no process or strict protocols in place, I would expect them that they will just leave. The BCAs are happy to work in, and certainly are looking to get the residential and vertical scene back on the ground, but they won't do that at the expense of their own policies and protocols. So I would expect, and the message would be, is visitors under level 3, you should know who's going to be turning up and try and control that just as much as the actual activity on site.
Yep. Just a note around the supply chain. So merchants have given us an indication that there's going to be a bit of restocking required. And that they are expecting that all of their builder customers are going to be ringing up and expect to be treated as a priority.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to preparation. We've still got a week to go under lockdown. I'd be making the most of that and planning, but also factoring in some level of disruption. Obviously, they can't deliver to the whole country at once. So I think it's just been a bit sensible and practical about your first week or two at least back on site, and factor in some disruption around that, because and I wouldn't ask for a delivery on Tuesday if your site protocols aren't in place, for instance, because you're breaking the rule on day one of what it will be then level 3.
Yeah, and look, some guidance from the merchants is that for heavy deliveries, they will have the ability to have a delivery team bubble. Yep. So they will have the ability to be able to work within their own health and safety protocols, but they should have an understanding of what yours are. And we expect most deliveries to be curbside. Gentlemen, you can elaborate on that if you'd like to, but they will also be able to help with heavy deliveries, managing that themselves without having to break the builder bubble. That we should expect that they can cater for heavy deliveries, is my understanding.
Absolutely, and that's part of the policy we'll be forming, is that the logistics process will be its own bubble. And this bubble effect, I think that's the way to start looking at some of these items, is we'll be cross-contaminating that if we allow builders to go and help unload a delivery truck. So the message we're sending is the delivery should be fully encapsulated in that process with that merchant or that supplier.
Yep.
And we shouldn't be cross-contaminating builders and tradespeople on and off site like that. They should be contained so that there's a clear demarc in that process.
Yeah, so merchants effectively will be closed. The front doors will not be open. So all ordering will be done online and over the phone, and that they'll have their own plans for delivering. But again, on Tuesday we're opening up, Dave, potentially, well, certainly thousands of building sites. We just can't expect that everyone's going to be the first delivery. So again, that's where this week is pretty important, Johnny. Great point there. Hey, so we've got a couple of particular questions. If we're doing a renovation and the clients are actually living at home, can the project proceed?
Do you want me to answer that one, Dave?
Yeah, go for that. Yep.
Yeah, look, hey, that was discussed when these guidelines got set out. And again, you've got to treat each case case by case. And I think we just look at that. I don't want to keep talking about it, but the bubble effect is if the people living in that house almost become part of the construction bubble, or they separate themselves from it completely. And so I think that it comes down to really good site management and making sure that it's not getting cross-contaminated. Because again, if we go back to David's point around the contact tracing, if we start to cross-contaminate that with people coming and going from a residential property when they're living in it, there's no way of really tracking that because we don't know who they've come into contact with. So I think it comes down to each builder to be really strict with their policy, with their interactions with their clients, and particularly the ones where they are living on the site. I personally have a case like that, and we will be putting I guess a separate bubble. The client will have their bubble and we will interact with their building outside of that, because we won't be able to manage their contact tracing like we can manage our own. So good question.
And the other thing, Matt, is that builders will need to talk to their clients to make sure they're comfortable, because they may also be in a situation where they say, look, I really don't want you working in the house with my family at this stage for whatever reason.
Yep. We've got some questions around, should we all be wearing gloves?
Well, look, when it comes to PPE, I think if you need gloves to carry out a task, you should wear them, but I wouldn't wear them because of COVID-19. The protocols are based on the guidelines set out by the government, and the government hasn't indicated that we should wear masks or gloves, and therefore you would only be doing it off your own back if you did. And look, I don't see surgical gloves being of any benefit on a building site, to be honest.
Yep. What we have heard is that in terms of the supply chain, that there will be some products quarantined for 3 days as they arrive to the building merchant, but it's not. The understanding is that builders won't be having their own individual quarantine for products to site. So again, that'll depend on their own protocols, but we are seeing some thought go into the health and safety of the supply chain, which is good to see. Hey, now I just want to talk about travel. So some questions coming through. Hey, 2 or 3 of the team travel together. Is that allowed? How do we manage, particularly for subcontractors? We've got architects and subbies and engineers listening in here. So, gentlemen, how do we how does a plumber with 2 or 3 guys going to site approach this?
Yep, difficult question, but a good one. I think also just think to the regionalisation, like where are we travelling? I think it's important to remember level 3 is not does not mean that we should be entering into other regions without consideration. And so if you're going to be travelling with people in a vehicle, I think again it's a case by case situation, but you become a work bubble. And I think that you need to really be conscious of the fact that, and go back to the contact tracing, can everyone in that vehicle contact trace themselves to and from what they're doing. And so I don't think there's any rules that say you can't, but I definitely think that you need to put in a few more steps around your contact tracing and your sanitation, moving in and out of that vehicle. What have you touched before getting back into it from your other destination? What destination was that? So you're going to have to form work bubbles, and I don't think that you should be just entering and exiting work vehicles without the thought of that contact tracing.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think within the protocols, Johnny, it also talks about work vehicles, where someone might be sharing, cleaning them down after use as much as you can. In terms of the inter-regional travel, we're actually just seeking some clarity on that through the Construction Accord and Construction Health and Safety New Zealand. So hopefully we'll get clarity on how far you can travel. I think in particular for some of the commercial sites, that may be an issue with work that's already started and they're going back. But we'll come back, or Chazans and the Construction Accord will clarify that hopefully in the next day.
Okay. Hey, so I just want to talk about the fact that we've all come out of lockdown. We've had to experience a new speed of life, and we're about to kick off again next week. And, you know, there will be some frustrations. We can't do things as quickly as we could before because we've got more to consider. We're going to have some disruptions to the supply chain. We're going to have to deal with subcontractors differently. So any advice in terms of the approach for adjusting to a new speed of construction and, you know, in terms of the, I suppose, getting up and running and then continuing, you know, so I'm thinking about setting expectations for clients just around how we adapt to this, these new protocols.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick off on that. I think that's part of the planning and preparation. And communication. It's being realistic, understanding that there will be some delays, and particularly in the startup, I think as people work out a new way of working, there'll be a loss of productivity to a certain extent. So setting some realistic expectations for yourself, not overestimating what can be achievable, and then communicating with clients about that, being quite clear that you know, you're doing your level best, but you're working under some constrained circumstances. I think the other part of it is learning as you go along. So within the teams, have those conversations that Johnny's talked about within the team. How are we going? What could we do better? Is there a better way of doing it while still observing the key things around the distancing and hygiene?
I would say, for just to extend on what David just said, is give yourself some time. There might be a little bit of an eagerness to make up for lost time with the past 4 to 5 weeks of non-productivity. In some ways, you'll become less productive by trying to do everything in the first week. I think get well established and get a good process in place, and you'll become more efficient in the future. And that's going to be around setting clear expectations with everyone that's involved in that site, including the client. So it just comes down to the basics of communication and just good forward planning. And definitely plan for some form of disruption.
Dave, on that, I just want to talk about policing. So can a site be closed down?
Yes, it can, absolutely. I think the thing though is that going back to the high trust model, WorkSafe does not have enough people to police the whole of the country, and in some ways we don't want that to happen ideally, but certainly they can be closed down. I think one of the policing things will be, going back to comments Johnny made, let's take the building inspectors as an example. I was on a call earlier today, and the chief executive of the Building Officials Institute was on it, and I asked him if he could help coordinate a common approach from all the local authorities. They are aware of these protocols that we've been talking about. So they will be, each council will have to have their own safety plan. Part of that, I expect, will be what they expect to see on site. So if they don't see those, as Johnny said, they may well say, sorry, I'm not going to come and do the inspection until you've got these things in place. So that's kind of the soft policing, where different parts of the industry, including suppliers, will say, sorry, we're not going to put our people at work because you have not got organised. So I think there'll be a degree of self-policing. I think also from the subcontractors, I actually hope we do see that as well, that they say, sorry, I'm not going to put myself or my staff at risk unless you've got the site set up properly. I actually think that's more effective than WorkSafe going around and closing down sites. But if they have to, they will.
Good. That's so this is for us to clearly understand the expectations and make sure whether we're an architect, an engineer, builder, or plumber, that we have got our own protocols and we expect the same from the people we're interacting with to keep our our staff safe. Supply chain, we talked about the fact that, we're all opening up. There's going to be thousands of building sites that are coming online on Tuesday. So preparation and setting expectation with your suppliers is important. And now, Dave, I just want to, level 2. So we've heard from the Prime Minister that there'll be consideration, I think it's the 11th of May, around proceeding to level 2. Can you talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on how we move towards there and what that might look like?
Yeah, so we're going to start that conversation this afternoon, Ellie. So yesterday, I think there was a minor disappointment that we weren't able to start on Thursday, but actually the really good upside was that the level 2 will be considered within a couple of weeks. So that's something we need to just start working out. So we'll use the same group that we've had developing these, maybe swap a couple of people in or out if they feel like they've done their bit or they need to concentrate. But yeah, we'll start that work now. So that we have the protocols. I don't think there's a massive job. I think there's a bit of tweaking and a bit of considering what level 2 looks like overall, and then we will take it back through the construction accord again. So we make sure we've got an industry-wide mandate.
Yep.
Just on that, just to extend, David, when we set out this initial set of guidelines, it was with level 2 in mind. So I would actually plan and prepare your sites that the level 3 protocols will be effective through level 2. And on the basis of, we don't know, and nobody knows, not including the government, how COVID will transmit in the future. So it may be that we do go through phases of interchange between level 2 and 3. That is a high possibility. So to streamline your approach moving forward, it might be best just to implement the level 3 protocols as the new normal until we get into something like level 1, which is a lot less restrictive. But ultimately, I think they're going to reshape level 2 so it still has quite strict working policies. So I would have confidence that the protocols as they're set out, it does say in there that we have done that to cover level 2 and 3.
Okay, well that gives us some confidence around what we can put in place, not just for a period of days or a few weeks, but that'll become our ongoing norm. So, guys, I'll just start sort of summarising what I'm hearing is we've got the actual industry's been recognised as actually having done a lot of hard work in putting these protocols in place. So we've got an opportunity to open up before some other industries.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, Matt, what's been one thing I'd say, this is a good example where the industry is actually working together. There's been a high level of cooperation. I think our challenge actually is how do we sustain that over time? Because it's good for the whole industry that people aren't, just disagreeing for the sake of it. So it's a great example. Really pleased with the results.
Yeah, so we've got a few days to plan towards Tuesday. So we're thinking about what next week's going to look like. We're preparing, our sub-trades and our suppliers for our plan. We've obviously got some work to do in terms of getting to site, making sure that nothing needs to be rectified or remedied. I'm sure there'll be a few weather tightness questions. Though we talked about that offline around the fact that suppliers should be ready to field a few calls about exposed product on site that may be outside the terms of use.
Yep.
So as an industry, we've got to come together and solve that. We've talked about restricting access to site. So thinking about the architects, engineers, and inspectors, they need to be sure about why they need to go to site. And where possible, be able to do things remotely. We need to ensure that as a site manager that we've got confidence in terms of what our staff are doing and setting the expectation with visitors and with suppliers and deliveries. Johnny, you've got project managers who are going to multiple sites. How are you managing their their bubble, their interaction.
Yep. So they're gonna have their own one. They're gonna be working from home because they can for all the administration side. And then when they go to site, they're going to be again nominated times when all the construction activity is at lunch, for instance, or is not active, so that they're not interacting face to face with them, because they can do that remotely with technology. Yep. So they'll be able to do their site inspections by themselves during the day, but just at different intervals of the daily activity of the site.
Yep. Good. Well, that's, again, we'll have to get used to using technology on the fly as well as using it from home. Gentlemen, just some final thoughts around what we should be looking out for, where we should be getting guidance. There's lots of information out there at the moment. Purpose of this webinar is really trying to provide some practical advice around some of these protocols and the regulations. So any final comments before we sign off?
Yeah, look, I would say exactly that. Don't be swayed by the multitude of information out there. I mean, if you stick close to the government set out guidelines, I don't think you can go too wrong. And definitely guidelines that have been endorsed by government. So, and I guess the hand sanitizer, soap discussion's a good indicator of that. People are getting confused around basics of it, but just do your research and stick to just the real basic guidelines, and don't rush it. And I'd use this as an opportunity with a glass half full approach to really get organised and just work with the situation we're in, because I think that it's going to be around for a while.
Yep. Dave?
Yeah, I think that they're really wise words. Just learn as you go along, as Johnny said, and recognise, don't rush it too much at the beginning, and try to make it up time. But and continue to look after yourself and your mental health, all of that stuff. None of that goes away.
Yes. Yep. Hey, now we've got I've got over 100 comments here on the chat line. I've got 80 questions. So been monitoring this and trying to give you a feel for what people are trying to understand. If they've got further questions, where can we point them? Where can they get answers from?
I think the key area is Construction Health and Safety New Zealand, but also some of the other health and safety groups. The one that, the Site Safe, for instance, has been involved in developing the guidelines. So they would be a key source. One thing actually, Matt, I did mean to say earlier, I'd forgotten. We're also looking to develop the protocols into a couple of different languages. So we're looking at Mandarin, and potentially, I can't remember the name of the Philippine language. You will know what that is, because that has both of them have a pretty big constituency, and also looking to get some short videos developed, because that's often an easier way to follow things as well.
Yes. Yep. Okay, great. Hey, so gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. Wishing everyone a productive week of planning. Hopefully we get some time to, just consider and reflect on Anzac Day on Monday, and then let's all work together to have a constructive start to level 3. And let's see if all the good work that we've been doing over the last few weeks can pay dividends as we bring our sites on stream quickly and safely. We're just going to put up a quick poll here just to get your feedback on the webinar today. I hope you've found it useful. We'll send a link to this if you want to share the recorded webinar with colleagues. But on behalf of everyone, Dave and Johnny, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Matt, and all the best to everyone.